Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to part 3 of our series on PC hardware for 8th grade. Now, if you're watching this video, you want to make sure that you check out parts 1 and part 2 to set up the whole context for this lesson. And understand that this is for my 8th grade students, okay? And we're also thinking about how we can understand computer hardware a little bit better to either one, help our businesses that we're running as an entrepreneur, two, help other businesses function and operate properly, okay, and three, to help those who want to know a little bit more about PC hardware and the internal workings of a computer on a different level, okay? So this is kind of trying to encompass everybody's idea here for this class, all right? So we've already talked about some data and some basic components, okay? And today what we're going to get into is we're going to get into the individual components that could be purchased as a separate add-on to the motherboard, okay? And we're going to talk about the various ports that you might find on your PC, okay? So let's continue on with the lesson. All right, so before, in lesson number 2, we set up the idea of easy relation, how Mr. C found it really easy to relate the internal components of a computer to customers by relating the components to an office, okay? And we said that you have the worker, who is the PC, and the desk space, which operates kind of like a way to allow the worker to work more efficiently. You had storage and filing cabinets and ways to communicate, so on and so forth. So let's carry on here. All right, here we go. And we're going to talk about the RAM today, this random access memory, okay? Now, system RAM specifically, okay, is kind of like a way for our worker to work efficiently, okay? Think about this. If this desk was cut in half and this person had a lot of files he was dealing with and they weren't all nice and neat in these little organizers here, right? He'd have to spread everything out. Now, if this desk was cut in half, okay, would he be able to spread everything out, or would he have to kind of temporarily close it up, put it to the side, and then when he needs to access it again, go over to it, pick it up, spread things back out, and put them in order? Well, that doesn't sound very efficient. You see, the bigger the desk the worker has, the more efficiently the worker can pull the information, look at the information, assess the information, and process the information, because it's right there, okay? We're going to go more into that here shortly. Then you have storage. You got to store the data. You got to store the instructions, okay? Remember, the processor only does what it's told. It does all the acting. It thinks and it acts, but it doesn't store memory like our noodles do, right? Our noodles store memories and process data, and we could pull things, right? But on a computer, that needs to be done somewhere else, okay? And that is done through storage or file storage, and there's many types of file storage, and we'll talk about that. Of course, you have other kinds of peripherals. Remember, peripheral is anything that's attached to the main board, just like our peripheral vision is anything that's kind of like in this area or this area if you're seeing me on the computer, and then as opposed to what's in front of us, right? There you go. So peripherals are items that allow input or output, okay? And then, of course, you got various ports that we're going to talk about. We're sending communication, and we're communicating with devices or sending signal and data to devices, or data is coming into the computer from these devices, and we'll talk about that. All right, so let's get into our essential components, the system RAM, all right? System RAM. Now, there's technically two different types of RAM, right? RAM stands for random access memory, okay? Let me ask you this. If a file or a video is on your hard drive, okay, is it constantly being read and accessed? No, only when you tell it to, right? So it's randomly accessed. It's not done always or always accessed, right? So storage is also a type of RAM, but we're going to focus on system RAM, or that desk area, all right? And system RAM is the temporary storage that allows the computer to run multiple programs at one time. That's kind of cool, right? See, what happens is just like that desk, right? If there's too much data being stored in the RAM, the computer has to say, okay, I got to close this file, put it over here on the hard drive where I can access it later, bring in the new file, open it up because that's what the user wants, and then we're going to go ahead and keep on and start processing that data. Oh, now the user wants to go ahead and go into YouTube. Okay, we got to close this file and we got to put that over here. Well, that doesn't sound very efficient, right? So if you have more space to lay out the work for the worker, okay, they can say, oh, YouTube, here we go. I already have the instructions open. Oh, they want to access that file. I already have the instructions open. Let's keep going. I got this, right? So the worker or the CPU needs to operate efficiently, right? So system RAM, it stands for random access memory. It's used by the system, used by the computer, used by the processor, right? And in modern PCs, desktop PCs for the consumer or the average entrepreneur, you might find RAM divided into little itty bitty strips or sticks, okay? People call them sticks of RAM, channels of RAM, whatever, all right? But think of it like a highway, a lane highway. You might have a single lane, okay? Or you might have multiple lanes, okay? So there you go. Just like we talked about with the processors, might have a single worker or multiple workers performing multiple tasks, okay? The trick is with RAM, if you're ever doing a system upgrade, you ever get like, well, my computer with 4 gigs of RAM and system RAM is kind of bogging down on me, but everything else seems to be operating all right. The person who's helped troubleshooting the computer might say, well, let's upgrade the RAM to see if that helps your problem, okay? But here's the catch. It's just not like, well, it is kind of like going and get a set of tires for a vehicle. Are all tires made the same? No, you got different tires of different sizes, right? Different heights, different widths, to fit different wheels, all right? Some people call them rims. Rim is the incorrect word, but fit different size wheels, right? Some are big, some are small, some, well, big, small, you get the idea, all right? So, yeah, they got to be matched, okay? So if you don't match it, there's a chance that, one, it's not going to fit, two, it's not going to work properly with the processor. The processor needs to easily communicate between the two, okay? Different types of RAM includes SDRAM, which stands for synchronous dynamic RAM. All right, that basically means that, it could basically change as needed, okay? Then there was an upgrade to DDR RAM, right, which stands for double data rate, which means it processes the information much faster. And then, of course, you got in laptops, you have SODIMM for laptops. You got DIMM, which stands for dual inline memory module. It's used for modern computers, okay, like the ones in front of you, because we're all running Windows 10, okay? This says 64-bit. I'm not going to get into that today, okay? But DIMM. And then if you're on a laptop, you might be dealing with SODIMMs, or small outline dual inline memory module, okay? Yeah, they vary in clock speeds, vary in formats, okay? You got to make sure that you're using at least a DIMM in most modern PCs. Now, that might change depending on the PC, the motherboard, so on and so forth. Remember, the biggest takeaway is that if you have more RAM, the processor can act more efficiently. Two, it's got to be matched to the computer, motherboard, and the processor. And, of course, this says 32 and 64 bits. We'll worry about that another day, all right? All right, let's talk about storage, right? Remember those filing cabinets in the office? The purpose of those is to store, house, maintain, and keep the data, okay? That makes sense, right? You got to store it somewhere, right? So, are those files always accessed all the time? No, right? You might be working on one assignment for class, and then a few days later, you're working on another assignment and not even thinking about the other assignment, not even accessing it, right? So it's a type of random access memory, right? All right, so storage basically does what it says in this first bullet point. It stores data, it stores files, it stores programs, right? Set of instructions for the computer and the CPU to process and interpret, okay? Now, there are multiple different types of storage devices, okay? The most common and least expensive one is the hard disk drive. It stores and writes data on magnetic plates or platters or cylinders that spin, okay? Most modern hard disk drives use SATA or serial ATA connections. I'll show you what those look like on the upcoming slides, right? Now, here's a disadvantage. They are less expensive because they're older technology, okay? However, there's a caveat, right? They are mechanical, okay? Mechanical means there's parts that are moving, okay? Now, inside a computer, there's always parts that are moving. Example, the fan spins, okay? But that usually is the only moving part, okay? Only moving part of the fans. Maybe if you have a water cooling system, you have the pump that's cycling the water, that kind of thing, okay? But yeah, okay? So, hard disk drives are mechanically operating. Now, not only does it have plates that spin, but there's a little read or write arm, I'll do my finger like this, that's accessing those plates, just going, right? Accessing the data as it spins, okay? And sometimes those things can spin kind of slower or kind of fast. You can see there, 5,400 RPM is the standard for small size hard drives, 7,200 RPM, and then of course 10,000 RPM, which requires additional power to run, okay? And that's what they look like. You can see here, I'll use my mouse here, these are the plates that spin, and here's that read-write arm that's going, right? So, two moving components. Now, what's really interesting, remember back in our cloud computing lesson, we talked about the server farms and how information that's stored on those server farms are actually much faster than, the computers there are much faster than and more powerful than what we have in our desktops, right? Most often, they're using these style of hard drives. Why? Because they are less expensive, okay? Less expensive, okay? So you could do higher end hard drives, but there are some disadvantages to it, and we'll talk about that now, all right? So the other kind of hard drive is a solid state hard drive. Now this is really cool because it uses and stores data instead of magnetically, okay? It does it electrically, which is really, really nice, right? It does do by electrical current, okay? So current going up and down and up and down and up and down. It writes that data really fast, okay? Just like a computer processes the information through the CPU, right? It's a bigger and faster version of our, I don't have it with me because I have it plugged into my computer, of our portable flash drives, our USB flash drives, right? It's more efficient, it's faster, it's, just better, right? Now, these also use serial ATA or SATA connections, okay? Just like the standard hard drives, all right? They are non-mechanical, okay? That means there's no moving parts, okay? They are blazing fast, comparatively speaking, okay? We're talking like 10 to 100 times faster accessing the data depending on how it's connected. Really, really cool, right? Unfortunately, they're a lot more expensive. I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, I did an upgrade on my PC at the house for my music computer, right? I bought 2 of these, right? And they were good quality hard drive. They were made by Western Digital. It was their mid-grade brand, right? By Western Digital, which is a very high-end hard drive company, right? And it cost me $50 per hard drive for a terabyte. So I got 2 terabytes for $100, right? Had I, at the time, looked for a solid-state drive, and I looked for them, it would have cost me $500, okay? I decided to go with the 50, not the 500, all right? Because the purpose of this was just to store musical data, okay? However, I did put my operating system on a solid state drive, okay? So it's very, very, very fast, okay? All right, so that's what they look like. There you go, solid state drives, all right? There you go. Other non-essential components. Remember we said that peripheral, right? Our peripheral vision, our narrow vision, right? Is any hardware attached to the main board. It may help free up system resources and system RAM. I kind of hinted at that in the last video, right? Example, all right? Say like you have a network or video or sound card, and I'll just go ahead and pull all these up, right? Let's look at what these things do first, and then I'll explain how they free up system resources, right? Sometimes a computer may not come with an integrated or built-in network card. Usually they do in modern computers for home computing and gaming computing, right? But sometimes not so much, right? So you'll need to add that. Most common, though, they will not come with a wireless network card to allow you to attach to Wi-Fi, okay? Or even Bluetooth, right? Bluetooth connectivity. Usually not on PCs. They have to be either integrated or add a separate card, okay? There you go. You have to add those in there, right? Sound cards, right? Modern processors have pretty good sound processing capabilities. Computers in the 2000s, not so much, all right? The early 2000s, okay? So in the early days of my recording, I actually would frequently upgrade my sound card because I found the sound card in the computer itself was a little bit lacking, okay? And then, of course, you got your video card, which converts visual and graphic data to supply to the monitor. That's what really frees up your system resources, okay? So here's what will happen, okay? Let's say we're using a high-end video card, okay? And let me see if I got a Post-it note down here. Nope, I got a falcon feather, so I'll just use this. All right. So let's just say that my computer comes with 4 gigabytes of RAM, and this feather represents 4 gigabytes of RAM, which sounds great, right? Oh, 4 gigs of RAM, that sounds pretty good. That's very close to what modern computers are coming with, right? However, it has an integrated card that uses 1 gig of RAM. You have just cut your resources down, right? A quarter, okay? Because this part right here is being used by the video. So you're only left with this part, okay? That's if it's integrated, okay? Which is okay. It works, right? It works. However, if you have a separate dedicated video card, it uses its own RAM so that you now have system resources in full to be used by the video card. All right, so again, integrated card, it's going to take away from your system resources, okay? Separate video card, put your resources back to you, okay? That's a big advantage. And of course, there's quality components and all that good stuff that are also in consideration as well, because sometimes when they make the motherboards, they may not go for the most expensive processor depending on the brand, the build, and the level that it's being built for and built at. All right, let's talk about connecting devices, okay? There's a lot of connections on here, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because why? Well, simply because you're not going to deal with all of these on a regular basis, okay? But you might see some of these on older computers, okay? So I'm going to take a couple of these and focus out on these, all right? So first things first, here you have your standard USB type A port, and you might be familiar with these, right? However, if you're looking at that going, Mr. C, this one's white in the middle, and all the ones that we have on our computers in front of us have a black thing in the middle of them. And then some of them have a blue thing in the middle of them. What's the difference, Mr. C? That's just confusing, okay? Well, there's USB 1.0, right? 1.1 and 2.0. They all use the white little circuit connector here, right? When you go to black, all right, that's 2.1 and higher, okay? When you get to blue, that's USB 3.0. And then when you get to teal or teal, right? That's even higher, okay? 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head, okay? So, some components, like keyboards and mouse, right, are fine using the USB 1.0. Sound devices, you need at least a USB 2.0, which is the black one. So if you're ever plugging in something and you realize the sound's not working right, check the color out and see if that's the right color for it, okay? If you're at the job site and you're using a USB scanner to scan UPC codes and such, scan those little barcodes, okay, USB 1.0 will work fine, okay? All right, so there you go. Then you have the Ethernet port, which is your network connecting port, okay, and then you have your modem. It is surprising how many people try to stick phone lines in this port. This is for phone lines. This is for networks, all right? So on the back of a printer, you might see this port, okay? Or you might see a USB port, etc. On the back of the computer, you might see one of these. Don't pull my desktops out in front of you right now in my classroom, all right? But usually you'll see some indicator lights letting you know it's connected, okay? There has been a return of the PS2 keyboard and the PS2 mouse because it is slightly faster than some of the USB 2.0 stuff as far as reaction time, so on and so forth. All right, so that's kind of cool. These other ones we're not going to focus on too much. These might be used in workplaces and in certain environments, so on and so forth. So we're not going to focus on that, especially the AT keyboard and the central pin, 36-pin connectors, serial ports, so on and so forth. Those are going the way of the dodo, but are still used in many older computer systems, okay? And then, of course, you got your eSATA. This is an external version of that SATA port. Remember serial ATA that we were talking about earlier, right? So if it's a SATA, S-A-T-A, okay, it's inside the computer. If it's eSATA, it's external or outside the computer. So you can technically connect an external hard drive straight to this port, and it will be faster than USB 3.0. Kind of cool, right? All right, moving forward. A lot of different sound devices and other devices here, so we're only going to focus on a few key ones, right? All right, usually, if you're dealing with a high-end surround sound system on a gaming PC, you'll see some these connections here along with these connections here. All right, usually your speakers or headphones will go into the green jack on the back of the computer, okay? And then if you're plugging in a microphone, it'll go in the pink one. And if you're plugging in like a device or a player or something like that, your phone, so you can rip music or something like that, you're going to be doing the line in. You're only using these connections if you got a surround sound speaker system, okay? I'm not going to talk about these because these, you won't find these too much anymore, especially with USB 3.0 and USB-C and all that kind of good modern connections, okay? Same thing down here. These are for video capture devices in modern computing, okay? It means that if you were to connect something like a DVD player or something like that, you can rip the video off of those devices. But let's go ahead and look at some video devices you might find, okay? You might find, let's see where they at here, HDMI, okay? HDMI is the current standard for connecting gaming devices, PCs, and other devices to monitors or screens, okay? You might also see on some Macs the display port, okay, which is kind of like the DVI, but except notice how this part here is a little bit different, okay? And then slightly older machines, you might see the DVI port, okay? Right now, all of our connections on the back of our computers are connected via HDMI. However, the screens on our computer screens right here, these 17-inch displays, only have the VGA, SVGA input. So we had to get an adapter to get those to work for you. All right. So those are your primary types of connectors. Now there are other connectors that are out there, as you can see here, but they're not as frequently used as, say, the USB, the HDMI, and display ports. Okay. And in some cases, the VGA port. All right. So I hope that makes things a little bit clearer for you. So here's another example of what they look like if you didn't like the way that other system looked, right? Again, you got your Ethernet port. You can kind of see your activity lights I was telling you about here. Compare that to your modem port. You got your USB-A. On some ends of USBs, you'll see like this bigger block thing, right? Like on the back of printers or back of some of Mr. C's digital mixers. You'll see this connection right there. That's for USB B style, okay? You got your minis, your micros, and you've seen these on cell phones before, right? You got your more audio signals, and of course you got your power connectors, which is really why I included this guy here, so that you could see what various types of power might look like, okay? And I believe that should bring us to the end of this unit. So go ahead and answer these 5 questions, and I believe I covered all these, all right? The most common connectors for monitors, right? I talked about at least 2 of them. Actually, I talked about 3 of them. Mass storage is used what type of storage connection? I mentioned both the external and the internal. We talked about the difference between solid-state drives and hard disk drives. Why is one better than the other, right? We talked about those 2. And then we talked about advantages to utilizing dedicated peripherals, right? And dedicated additional sound cards. And look there, another lesson in under 25 minutes. Woohoo! We're done! All right, that brings us to the end of our video series on PC hardware for 8th grade. And check me out and check it out for the next lesson.